I'm a small axe, you're a small axe, and this is a small axe. Thank you very much for joining me and my channel. So I have not uploaded in a really long time, and my apologies for the delay. It's not really an excuse, it's just an explanation that life has happened, and yeah, that is where we are. So today I decided that I just kind of wanted to have a conversation about the difference between race, ethnicity, and nationality, right? And like the utility or the importance of understanding these three different ideas or social constructions, or like just understanding these three concepts. And this tends to, like, the reason why this is important to think about is because, well, before I move on, this has been articulated in a previous video that I made, but just to catch you up. So myself, right, small axe, I am born here in the United States and I reside in the United States despite my parents being from the island of Jamaica. And because of that, right, I see that other people that are located particularly in the United States tend to export and utilize their own framework of race and what it means to racialize people, and export that, particularly the one drop rule, out to other places and other people. And what that does is it collapses, right, the importance of understanding the nuance and like just incredible detail in understanding someone's race, how that's in conversation with their ethnicity, and how that is also in conversation with their nationality. So I wanted to outline in this video what those things actually are. So even though it might seem obvious, I still think that it is worth mentioning. Race is a social construction, and race particularly is a social construction that categorizes people due mostly in part to their phenotype, right? So you do not choose your race, right? Like, it is chosen for you, right? You are racialized in essence. So using myself as an example, I am a black person I'm a black person. Based on my hair, based on my skin tone, right? Like I am an unambiguously black person, which means that when people see me, right, there's no guessing whether or not I am a black person. That is like people know this, despite wherever it is that I am, whether that be here in the United States, right, or whether I am back in Jamaica or engaging with other people from across the world. It's not a debate that I am a black person because of my skin tone and all the different ways in which we assign phenotype to this particular category. And obviously, right, when I say that that race is a social construction, what I mean by that is that race is something that is made up, right? It is not something that it's not something that we can distinctly define. So race is not something that we can distinctly define, right, outside of our social world, outside of thinking through the lens of social studies. So despite race being something that is made up, right, the consequences that are attached to being in specific bodies are not made up, right? There are real consequences that are attached to being a black person anywhere in the world, right? Because we know not just anti-blackness, but also anti-indigeneity, right? These concepts or these ideas manifest itself in real violence, right? And this violence, racialized violence, particularly anti-blackness and anti-indigeneity, is something that is global. Anti-blackness and anti-indigeneity are global things, right? So it doesn't matter. When I say that, it means it doesn't matter where you go in the world, right? It doesn't matter where you go in the world, you will always come in contact with some form of racism if you live in a Black body, right? If you're an indigenous person, right? There is some form of racism that you will experience regardless of wherever it is that your body is located in the world. So in essence, race is the way in which we have produced categories based on the ways in which people looked. And when I say we, right, I'm not necessarily saying that like I have, right, or Black people have, but obviously through the process of colonization, we have come to these terms, because obviously colonization is like the way in which many of, you know, like a lot of these isms have been birthed, or one of the touchstones that we can actually touch and agree on, that a lot of these ideas have been exported to the rest of the world, and particularly people of color. The next category that I really would like to kind of like also define in this space is thinking about ethnicity. So what is ethnicity, right? And why is that distinctly different from race? Ethnicity, right, captures culture. Ethnicity captures the type of music that you might have been brought up listening to. Ethnicity captures language. Ethnicity captures culture. Ethnicity captures the type of food that you might be eating. Ethnicity captures religion, right? Like ethnicity in essence is the culture at which you have been brought up in, or the culture in which your family, the culture that you've been socialized within, right? So for example, I am a Black person, and I am also a West Indian person, right? You can be a West Indian person and be Asian. You can be a West Indian person and be white. You can be a West Indian person and be, you know, any mix of the variation that I talked about. You can be a West Indian person and be indigenous. And so with that being said, right, like ethnicity also is a reflection of history, right? The histories that are attached to the spaces in which, you know, our culture have been produced, right? Whether that be like, you know, and for example, I'm thinking of something like patty, right? Like beef patty, right? Like in the Caribbean, right? Like we essentially, like as Black people and African people, like that is an African, you know, like quick meal, right? Or lunchtime type of food. And that history that comes specifically, that the reason why there are Black people in the Caribbean, or the reason why something like a meat pie can be found across not just the Caribbean, but also found particularly in West Africa, is through the history of the transatlantic slave trade of African people, the human trafficking of Black people in the Caribbean, which helped to produce the system of globalization and capitalism that we kind of take for granted in our everyday, right? So ethnicity, right? And the other thing too is like, another example that I can articulate for you here is the fact that like I'm someone who is speaking English to you, right? Like, and even like and even though I'm speaking English, there are particular articulations of English. There are particular ways that people speak English that is also attached to culture and where people are from, right? So I hope that illuminates, right, like in essence what ethnicity means, right? So like, for example, when we think about, right, Latinx people, when we think about Hispanic people, when we think about people from Latin America, essentially, right, like being Latin, right, in the West is essentially an ethnicity similar to being West Indian, right? Like it reflects the type of Spanish colonization that had been articulated in the West, right? Particularly in places like South America and the Caribbean and Central America. And so so hopefully that illuminates what in essence ethnicity is. Nationality, that's another concept that I think needs illumination, right? So nationality just pretty much defines the borders that you either you were born in, right, or your family was born into, right? And obviously these borders can be natural, right? Natural borders like mountains and being on an island, those are natural borders. But then there are also other borders that are social constructions, like for example, thinking about, the Berlin Conference and the way in which continental Africa have been cut up into many different pieces for the purpose of, European powers, right? All of those borders are not natural borders, right? There are different people of various ethnicities that like are share the same ethnicity, but essentially live in different countries and have different national identities because of the way in which those borders have been man-made, similarly to the United States, right? So nationality in essence just describes where your body is located in the world and the histories that are associated with this particular type of specific to the space in which you live. So for example, right, like despite Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Antigua, right, being a part of the West Indies, Grenada being another place, right? Like despite all these places being colonized and dominated by the British, right? There are still important specific histories, right? Guyana is another place, right? Important specific histories that are unique to these spaces, right? Barbados is another one, right? Where people have talked about for a very long time. Barbados is the most British island out of the entire British Caribbean, and it's interesting now thinking about Barbados and it now becoming a republic, and just even thinking about the leadership of Mia Mottley and just how far left she is in comparison to her other Caribbean counterparts. So obviously there are specific histories that are tied to these spaces, and it's important for us as people engaging with each other in the world that we don't lose sight of what these definitions actually mean, because when we allow ourselves to collapse and flatten people's identities in this way, we find that we tend to end up in really messy situations that are kind of unnecessary. And the thing is that thinking about other Black people and thinking about other brown people, it's if you are someone who wants to be in fellowship and cares and loves other people of color, right, and loves other Black people, right, it's important to love people in the way that they understand it, right? It feels nice when you meet someone and they genuinely care to know who you are, right? They genuinely care to know, right, the nuances of your personality and the things that you like and you don't like, right? And why it is that those things happen, right? It's nice when people care about what it is that you like to do in your childhood. And I think that when we kind of zoom out of the interpersonal, right, and think more so on the communal, national, and even global level, right, that if we do want to bridge gaps, particularly amongst the diaspora and other people in other parts of the Black diaspora and continental Africans, right, then it's important for us, right, to understand the histories that are unique to these places, right, and not project the ways in which we understand race, right, onto other people, or the ways in which we understand how to categorize and flatten people based on where we are, right? Because love doesn't feel like love when people are telling you that something is love, and to how you understand love, and how you understand love to be incongruent, right? Because essentially that still feels violent. It is violent, right, to export, for example, the way in which we understand race in the United States, for example, the one drop rule, into spaces like the Caribbean and Latin America, because essentially it doesn't work like that in those spaces, right? Yes, you can be white passing and be Black in this country, and that's good and dandy, but that's not how that works in the Caribbean or Latin America. If you look white, you just are white. And so I think we we are not showing up in love when we don't take the time to understand how it is that these things work, and particularly what that looks like to other people and what harm looks like to other people. And so I guess just the larger point of this video is just to say that I'm inviting everyone who is across space and time and can hear me and can see me, or that we take the time to really get to know each other, and understand these definitions, and then understand what they mean, and what that looks like to people that we love and we care about, and even people that we don't like, right? Or people that we are in disagreement with. Because it's easier to get to know someone when you kind of get to understand their history. Like, things make sense, right? Like, when it makes sense when you understand people's history. Okay, based on that history, like, it's like, okay, right? Communally, it makes sense that this type of behavior is being exercised, right? And so that's what I want to invite people to do. You're invited to learn about each other. You're invited to learn about other Black people and the way in which Black people experienced their lives, right? Because Blackness is not a monolith. It is very diverse. It has texture, there's hue, there's different saturations, right? Like, there are just different ways in which Blackness is articulated. And if we do care about other Black people, and if we do care about other people of color, then I think that this is like an important way in which we can show up in love and care for each other. And I think that's my piece. I'm a small axe, you're a small axe, and this is a small axe. Walk good, everybody. See you in the next one. Bye.